They arrived with nothing. Suitcases held together with rope and recipes held together by heart. They traded the sun of Sicily and Naples for the cold shadows of New York's tenements. Their new world was built on grit, sweat, and sacrifice. But their real inheritance wasn't land or gold. It was tomatoes, flour, and garlic. And with these humble gifts, they built an empire of flavor. In this film, we will show you the 25 iconic dishes that tell the story of red sauce and the American dream. Sunday gravy. It began not with a recipe, but with a commandment. On Sunday, the family eats together. And the soul of that gathering was the sauce, or as they called it, the gravy. It started on Saturday night with a prayer and a mountain of garlic. This wasn't a quick marinara from a jar. This was a slow, agonizing act of love. A pot so large it could baptize a child, filled with crushed tomatoes, wine, and the ghosts of last Sunday's pork bones. For 8 hours it simmered, perfuming the entire tenement building with a scent so powerful it could settle arguments and heal broken hearts. The gravy was more important than church. It was the weekly miracle that turned a cramped, cold apartment into a palace, and a table of poor immigrants into a royal family. Spaghetti and meatballs, the most famous Italian dish that Italy has never heard of. This is the ultimate symbol of the American upgrade, a beautiful lie served on a platter. Back in the old country, on the sun-scorched hills of Sicily, meat was a whisper, a luxury reserved for weddings and holidays. But in the butcher shops of New York, surrounded by noise and opportunity, beef was cheap and plentiful. So the immigrant cooks, missing the flavors of home, but blessed with the bounty of a new land, did the unthinkable. They took the sacred Sunday gravy, the simple spaghetti, and crowned it with giant, tender meatballs the size of a child's fist, softened with breadcrumbs and rich with garlic. It was a dish born from a paradox, the memory of poverty and the reality of abundance. A plate so overflowing it could only have been dreamed up in America. Homemade pasta, the sacred ritual, a quiet Sunday meditation. Before the factories and cardboard boxes, there was only this, a snow-white mountain of flour on a wooden board and the warmth of your own 2 hands. At the center of that mountain, a well, like a volcanic crater. Into this crater went the eggs, yolks so golden they held the memory of an Italian sun we thought we'd lost forever. This wasn't just mixing, it was a dance, a conversation with the dough. Kneading it, folding it, feeling it come alive under your palms until it was smooth as silk. Then came the rolling, back and forth, turning the heavy ball into a sheet so thin you could almost read a newspaper through it. This was the difference between life and death for pasta. The dried noodles from a store were a convenience. The fresh pasta, hanging to dry over the back of a kitchen chair, was a declaration. It was the story of a Nona's love, a tradition carried across an ocean, rebuilt from memory on a humble kitchen table in a new world. Lasagna, the skyscraper of the Sunday table, built to mend the homesick soul. This was the dish you made when the family gathered, when a new baby was born, or when the memory of the old country became too sharp to bear alone. It was architecture born of hope. The layers told their story. First, the wide sheets of homemade pasta, the foundation, made with American flour that was cheaper and more plentiful than they ever dreamed of in Sicily. Then a thick layer of creamy ricotta, a luxury that reminded them of the life they were building. Then came the flood of the Sunday gravy, the same slow-simmered sauce that their grandmothers made, a taste of a home they could never return to. And finally, the roof, a blizzard of mozzarella and Parmesan, a rich golden shield against the cold New York winters. This wasn't just a meal, it was a fortress of flavor, a delicious wall built against poverty and loneliness. Chicken Parmesan, the imposter on the throne of Italian-American food. This is not a dish from the heart of Italy. It was born on the streets of New York, a testament to the American dream. In the old country, the hero of this dish was the humble eggplant, sliced thin, fried and layered with sauce and cheese, a meal for those who couldn't afford meat. But in America, chicken was king. It was cheap, plentiful, and a symbol of a new, prosperous life. So the eggplant was dethroned. The chicken cutlet was pounded thin, like a declaration of war against the poverty they left behind. It was baptized in egg and breadcrumbs, then fried until golden and arrogant. It was smothered in the sacred Sunday gravy, covered with a thick blanket of mozzarella, and broiled until the cheese bubbled and browned in spots. This wasn't just dinner. It was the sound of a new generation, a generation that could afford not just to survive, but to feast. Braciole, the hidden jewel of the Sunday gravy. While the meatballs were for the children, braciole was for the grown-ups. This was a treasure you had to earn. It began with a humble flank steak, pounded paper-thin, then covered with a king's ransom of fillings, breadcrumbs, sharp provolone cheese, prosciutto, garlic, and parsley. The true artistry was in the rolling. Tucked and tied with butcher's twine like a precious gift, these bundles were seared to a dark crust, then submerged in the bubbling pot of Sunday gravy. For the next 8 hours, they performed a slow, secret magic. The meat became impossibly tender, while the braciole itself gave its rich, cheesy flavor back to the sauce. It was the ultimate give and take, a dish that fed the sauce and then became a feast of its own. Sausage and peppers, the official perfume of the Italian street festival, the scent of temporary freedom. For 6 days a week, the men who built New York disappeared into factories and construction sites. But for 1 week in September, during the Feast of San Gennaro, the streets belonged to them, and the air belonged to this dish. It wasn't a complex recipe. It was a chaotic symphony played out on a giant pan over an open flame. Sweet Italian sausage, blistering and spitting next to thick strips of sweet onions and bell peppers. This was food for the people, served on a cheap Italian roll that could barely contain the greasy, glorious mess. You ate it standing up, bumping shoulders with your neighbors, with music blasting and colored lights overhead. It wasn't just a sandwich. It was the taste of forgetting your troubles for a day. It was the sound of a community celebrating life in a new world. Baked ziti. If lasagna was the carefully constructed cathedral of the Sunday table, baked ziti was the glorious, chaotic street festival. This wasn't a dish for quiet contemplation. This was the answer to the question every immigrant family faced: how do we feed the entire neighborhood for a christening? It was a beautiful rebellion against precision. You didn't layer, you tossed. Ziti noodles were thrown into a bowl the size of a baptismal font, mixed with oceans of creamy ricotta, handfuls of mozzarella, and baptized in the sacred Sunday gravy. Piled high into a pan the size of a small suitcase, this was generosity made edible. Baked until the top became a rugged volcanic crust of brown cheese, every scoop was a surprise. You never knew what you'd get. A pocket of soft cheese, a chewy noodle, a river of red sauce. It was democratic, delicious, and the ultimate symbol of community. Fettuccine Alfredo, the dish that lost its Italian accent and became a movie star. The original Alfredo in Rome was a simple, elegant affair, fresh pasta tossed with butter and aged Parmesan. But when it crossed the ocean, something got lost in translation. Or rather, something was added. A lot was added. The American version became a glorious symphony of excess. It wasn't just butter, it was a mountain of it. It wasn't just cheese, it was a blizzard of it. And then came the ultimate American sin, heavy cream. Oceans of it. The delicate pasta was drowned in a thick, velvety sauce, so rich it was practically a dare. It became the go-to dish for first dates and fancy celebrations, a creamy, decadent dream that was pure, unapologetic America. New York pizza slice, the ultimate democratic food. It began as a memory of Naples, a small, personal pizza eaten with a knife and fork. But in the fast-paced, unforgiving streets of New York, there was no time to sit. The pizza had to evolve. Immigrant bakers, fueled by cheap American flour and a need to feed the working masses, stretched the dough wider, thinner, larger. The Neapolitan pizzetta became the giant American pie. They sold it by the slice for a nickel, so even the poorest factory worker could afford a hot meal. The correct way to eat it became a ritual in itself. You fold it in half, creating a U-shaped channel. It's a feat of engineering that funnels the glorious orange grease straight to the back of your throat and inevitably down your arm. It wasn't elegant. It was fuel. It was freedom, folded in half. Chicago deep dish pizza, the Windy City's defiant answer to New York. In 1943, Ike Sewell at Pizzeria Uno decided that pizza shouldn't just be a snack, it should be a meal, a heavy, substantial meal. So he built a pizza like a fortress, a deep, buttery crust pressed into a high-sided steel pan, creating a bowl. Then he flipped the rules upside down. Slices of mozzarella went on the bottom, followed by a dense layer of sausage, and finally a chunky, sweet tomato sauce on top. Why on top? Because if he put the cheese on top, it would burn before the massive crust was cooked. It takes 45 minutes to bake. It requires a knife and fork. It's not elegant, it's not fast, and it's not just pizza. It's a casserole of pure American ambition. Calzone, the original Hot Pocket. Born on the streets of Naples, this was the lunch of a man on the move. The name means trouser leg, a perfect description for a meal designed to be carried from home to the factory. Unlike a pizza, which wears its heart on its sleeve, the calzone is a secret. A half-moon of pizza dough stuffed with creamy ricotta, mozzarella, and salami, then folded over and sealed shut like a confidential letter. It's baked in a fiery oven until the outside is a hard, golden crust, while the inside becomes a molten core of cheese and meat. The first cut is a revelation. A cloud of steam escapes, revealing the treasure hidden within. It wasn't just lunch. It was a piece of home you could hold in your hand. Meatball sub. What happens to the sacred meatballs from Sunday dinner on a cold Monday morning? They are reborn. The meatball sub is the working man's answer to nostalgia, a way to take the memory of the family table to the construction site. It begins with a hero roll, a loaf of Italian bread sliced open and hollowed out to create a trench. Into this bread coffin go the leftover meatballs, still rich from simmering in the Sunday gravy. They're smothered in more sauce, covered with a blanket of provolone or mozzarella, and broiled until the bread is crusty and the cheese is a molten lava. It's impossible to eat cleanly. The sauce drips down your chin. The bread, soaked with gravy, threatens to fall apart. But every messy bite is a taste of home, a hot, heavy, delicious memory of family, stuffed into a sandwich. Italian beef sandwich, Chicago's answer to everything. This is not a neat sandwich. This is a wet, messy, glorious disaster. It was born out of necessity at Italian weddings in the stockyards of Chicago, a clever way to stretch a small amount of beef to feed a huge crowd. The magic begins with a tough cut of beef, roasted for hours with garlic and spices until it's tender enough to fall apart. But the real secret is the au jus, the the beef's own gravy. The meat is sliced paper thin, dropped back into the hot gravy to soak, then piled high onto a soft Italian roll. And then comes the baptism. You can order it dipped or wet, where the entire sandwich is submerged in the hot gravy before serving. You have to eat it fast, standing with your elbows on the counter, in a stance they call the Italian stance. It's the only way to avoid wearing the gravy home. Pasta e fagioli, the heartbeat of cucina povera, the cuisine of the poor. This wasn't a soup you chose to make, it was a soup you had to make. It was born in the dirt-floor kitchens of southern Italy, a way to turn yesterday's scraps into tomorrow's dinner. The recipe was simple because it had to be. A handful of whatever pasta was left over, broken spaghetti, stray elbows, a scoop of cheap cannoli beans, maybe an onion, a carrot, a celery stalk if you were lucky, all simmered together until the beans melted into a creamy, starchy broth that hugged every piece of pasta. It wasn't elegant, but spooned into a bowl on a cold night, it was warmer than any blanket. It was the taste of survival, a humble masterpiece built from leftovers and love. Antipasto, the feast before the feast. In Italy, antipasto might be a simple slice of melon with prosciutto, but in America, it became a declaration of independence from hunger. This wasn't just a starter, it was a sprawling, edible map of the homeland. On a giant wooden board, the New World's abundance was laid out like a king's treasure. Thin, salty slices of prosciutto next to spicy salami, sharp provolone cheese beside creamy mozzarella, oily marinated artichoke hearts, roasted red peppers glistening like jewels, and a mountain of salty olives. This was the plate you put out when company came over, a vibrant, colorful testament that screamed, "We have arrived! We are not hungry anymore." Every piece was a story, a flavor from a village you left behind, now shared in a land of plenty. Garlic bread. Another beautiful mistake. A ghost of a memory transformed by a new world. The Italian immigrant arrived remembering bruschetta, a slice of stale bread toasted over coals, rubbed with a single raw garlic clove, and drizzled with a thread of precious olive oil. It was a snack of poverty, sharp and rustic. But in the booming bakeries of 1950s America, bread wasn't stale. It was soft, white, and abundant. Olive oil was expensive, but butter was cheap. So the memory was remade, American style. The bread became a soft Italian loaf, sliced open like a book. The garlic wasn't a mere suggestion, it was a loud declaration, minced and multiplied. And then came the butter. Rivers of it, melted and infused with parsley, soaked into every pore of the bread until it was heavy with flavor. It was wrapped in aluminum foil, a modern marvel, and baked until the entire house smelled like a garlic bomb had gone off. It emerged from the oven soft, greasy, powerful, and completely, unapologetically American. A side dish so beloved, it often becomes the main event. Fried calamari, the snack that turned a sea monster into a delicacy. For generations, squid was something you put on a hook to catch a real fish. It was cheap, it was rubbery, and it was looked down upon. But Italian-American cooks knew its secret. They sliced the intimidating tentacles and tubes into delicate rings, gave them a baptism in milk to make them tender, and then a coating of seasoned flour. The magic happened in the deep fryer. In seconds, the rubbery rings transformed into golden, crispy, incredibly light bites of food. Served with nothing more than a lemon wedge and a side of hot marinara sauce for dipping, fried calamari became the king of the American appetizer menu, a simple, crunchy testament to the fact that even the humblest creatures can become stars. Cannoli,
the pastry that became a legend. Long before Hollywood, this was a taste of Sicily, a memory of carnival season. It's a study in contrasts, a fragile, blistered tube of fried pastry dough, so brittle it shatters when you look at it. But inside, a secret, a thick, sweet, impossibly creamy filling of ricotta cheese, dotted with chocolate chips or pistachios. They were filled to order, never before, because the shell had to stay crisp. To get a soggy cannoli was an insult. In America, it became more than a dessert. Thanks to a famous movie line, it became a symbol. Leave the gun, take the cannoli. It was a reminder that even in a world of violence and chaos, you never ever forget the sweet things in life.
Tiramisu, the pick-me-up. In the fast-paced, ambitious world of 1980s America, this dessert was a godsend. Its name literally means pull me up, and it did exactly that. It was a layered masterpiece of caffeine and comfort. Ladyfinger cookies, delicate and dry, were quickly dipped in strong, bitter espresso, a baptism of energy. Then came the cream, a heavenly cloud of mascarpone cheese, whipped with egg yolks and sugar until it was impossibly light and airy. Layer after layer, a perfect contrast of dark and light, bitter and sweet. Finished with a final generous dusting of dark cocoa powder, tiramisu wasn't just a dessert. It was the sophisticated, delicious fuel needed to chase the American dream.
Zeppole, the chaotic cousin of the donut, the joyful sound of the street festival. If the beignet is the elegant queen of the French Quarter, the Zeppole is the loud, laughing peasant from Naples, brought to the streets of New York. There are no perfect squares here, no delicate presentation. This is the food of the people, born from simple dough and hot oil. The recipe is a memory of the feast of Saint Joseph in Sicily. Just rustic, imperfect spoonfuls of dough, sometimes enriched with ricotta, dropped into bubbling hot oil. They puff up into uneven, glorious golden balls, crispy on the outside and impossibly light and steamy on the inside. But the real ritual is the sugar. They aren't delicately dusted. They are thrown, hot and greasy, into a brown paper bag with a mountain of powdered sugar. The bag is twisted shut and shaken violently, a rhythmic, percussive sound that is as much a part of the festival as the music. You eat them straight from that warm, sugar-stained bag with your bare hands, burning your fingertips, a cloud of sweet dust with every bite. It's simple, cheap, and the pure, unadulterated taste of community celebration.
Italian rainbow cookies, the edible flag of a lost motherland, a jewel box of memory. You would not find these cookies on any ordinary day. They appeared only at weddings, at Christmas, at the most sacred family gatherings. They were a quiet declaration of pride, a complex, time-consuming labor of love designed to prove one thing: we have not forgotten where we came from. It begins with 3 separate, identical almond cakes. The batter, rich with almond paste, is divided. One part is left pure white. One is dyed the vibrant green of Sicilian fields. The last, the passionate red of a Naples sunset. Baked into thin, delicate layers, they are then glued together with just a whisper of apricot jam, a mortar binding the colors of the Italian flag. But the magic happens overnight. The cake is pressed under a heavy weight, a symbolic pressure of a new life, fusing the flavors and colors into a single beautiful block. The final step is a baptism in dark, bitter chocolate, a protective shell for the treasure within. Cut into small, neat rectangles, each cookie was a perfect edible tribute, a bite-sized masterpiece that was as beautiful as it was delicious.
Espresso, the final punctuation mark, the scent of home for a homesick heart. After the storm of pasta, the richness of the meat, and the sweetness of dessert, comes the ritual that brought the old country back to life. Espresso isn't a drink you linger over. It's a quick, sharp, surgical strike of flavor, a taste so intensely Italian it could transport you back to a piazza in Naples. The espresso bar became the social club for the new arrivals. In the old cafes of Little Italy, the constant hissing, steaming, and pulling of the giant chrome espresso machine was the neighborhood symphony. It was a beautiful monster, forcing hot water through finely ground, dark roasted beans, extracting the very soul of coffee in under 30 seconds. Served in a tiny, delicate cup that felt almost fragile in a working man's hands, it arrives with a layer of reddish-brown crema on top, the sign of a perfect shot. It wasn't meant to be sipped slowly. It was a single, powerful gulp, often with a twist of lemon peel. It's bitter, it's strong, and it was the definitive, unapologetic end to the meal and the start of a conversation.
Biscotti, twice baked, built to last forever. This wasn't a soft, chewy cookie for children. This was a hard, crunchy biscuit forged in the ancient tradition of Roman legionaries, designed to survive long journeys. The name itself means twice cooked. First, a dense log of almond dough is baked. Then it's sliced and baked again until all the moisture is gone and it becomes as hard as a rock. You don't just bite into a biscotti. That's a mistake you only make once. The ritual is the dunk. A quick dip into a glass of sweet vin santo, a bitter espresso, or even a simple cup of coffee. For a brief moment, the hard cookie surrenders, soaking up the liquid, softening just enough to be bitten. It's a cookie that requires patience, a partner, and a little bit of ceremony. Sfogliatella. And so we arrive at the end, at the masterpiece, the sfogliatella. The name means small, thin leaf, but its nickname is more famous, the lobster tail. This is not a pastry for the amateur. This is the final exam of the Italian baker, a testament to a skill passed down through generations, a secret guarded more closely than any family fortune. The dough is stretched by hand over a massive table until it is a transparent sheet, impossibly thin. It's then rolled layer upon layer upon layer, trapping air and butter between each sheet. Cut and shaped, it bakes into a delicate, shell-like sculpture with hundreds of crispy, flaky ridges. The first bite is an explosion of texture. The shell shatters into a million tiny shards, a sound like applause, revealing a warm, sweet filling of ricotta and candied citrus. It is the perfect final bite, a crispy, sweet, impossibly complex miracle that contains everything we've talked about: the struggle, the artistry, the history, and the sweet, sweet taste of the American dream.